I love the Prada 2026 menswear show, and I want to talk about it, but one element of it does kind of bother me and prove a little bit concerning, at least the way that I think about it. One of the elements of this show is the celebration of loved and worn in garments. On paper isn't a bad thing. Stained garments aren't a bad thing. Perma-stained garments is not a bad thing. I think it's a very interesting conversation to be had about fashion, ownership, and the life cycle therein. In fact, in the previous collection, we saw this wear, tear, and this subtle pseudo-distressing being included in their fabrications on their bag. If you've ever shopped for a vintage colored Prada nylon, this is usually how they end up looking. And this is a big if this catches on in the mainstream zeitgeist, this is probably one of the worst lessons for fashion to latch on to. Think about like when ripped and distressed clothes were really big in 2015, 2016. Everybody's big on 2016 right now. That was a big trend, and a part of that trend was distressed and pre-loved clothing. One of my favorite collections by Raf is the Virginia Creeper collection because the clothes were designed to eat themselves alive. All the clothes were washed or treated with a particular enzyme that sped up the process of decay with the clothes. This enzyme treatment gave each of the pieces a very unique wear and tear that broke down and tattered over time. The long point I'm trying to get at is that if this trickles into the mainstream zeitgeist and fast fashion level, it's never the processes, it's always the end result. Part of the reason as to why I hate denim at the mainstream level, or at least fast fashion mainstream level, because it's some amalgamation of this fuck-assery. Whiskered, worn-in denim that looks like somebody with a tribal tattoo in 2002 and fucking flip-flops would put on. Never really an interesting wash or an interesting cut, except at like the mid to high end of denim. You never really see anybody doing unique cuts or shapes or fabrics of denim at the mainstream level. I hate for this to be normal and trickle down to the mainstream average consumer level because I feel like that would, yes, it would normalize like dirty, worn in, and loved clothes. It would also devalue the $300 Carhartt jacket and the in-group out-group signaling that has. I think this show is beautiful as a statement, as a work of art, and what it represents. But if this trickles down and if this becomes a mainstream product, again, when most people are buying denim at a mainstream level, they're not buying interesting fabrications or cuts, but instead they're buying maybe a cut, a wash, and a patina, and a simulacrum of authenticity that was once able to be created at the mainstream level. That's partially because all that's being sold at the mainstream level is that simulacrum of authenticity. There was a point in time in which buying pre-ripped jeans was seen as insane. Mainstream level, it's just washes and maybe 2 to 4 different fits.